I think it's time to get this started. I'm Dan Dudley, and I am the real CFO and COO, so the acting career is over. Acting career is over. Should I take a bow? Acting career is over. So the first thing I want to do tonight is say thanks again to the search committee, and I really know they took a huge amount of time and effort going through this whole process. And so I wanted to say thank you to that group again. I know a few of them are here in the audience. You know, this was a nationwide search, 200 original applicants, whittled down to one president, and that was a long and arduous process, and I know they put a lot of time and effort into it. So anyway, if you could help me give them a thank you. So let me give you a little lay of the land of what we're going to do tonight. So I'm going to introduce Daniel, and he's going to talk for 20 to 30 minutes, give you a little bit more of his background and what he's all about. And then Michael will come up, and we'll do, we already have some questions that have been given to us from our Facebook page, so Michael's going to kind of ask those questions. Daniel's going to answer them as best as he can. And with his 4 days of experience, 3 days of experience, and we'll do that. But I wanted to let you know that afterwards, Daniel will mill around. So if you want to come up, maybe personally ask him a question or just meet him, you can do that afterwards. The other thing I want to let you know is if you go to our Facebook page and ask another question, just leave a comment on our Facebook page with a question. Then we'll either answer that question or ask Daniel to answer that question next Saturday when we do this again, or we'll answer it some other way through a different communication. So we'll get those questions answered for you. To introduce Daniel, we spent time this weekend. We've spent time today. We had a great lunch with the staff. And what I truly enjoyed about that lunch was the staff learning about Daniel, but really Daniel truly interested in learning about the staff and asking questions. And it was a great back and forth between us, all kind of sitting in a room, socially distanced, of course, and boxed lunches, so we didn't have to touch the same food. But it was just a great time where we all got to interact, and you could already see the dynamic about how great this is going to be between the existing staff and a new leader. So anyway, I want to welcome Daniel Rogers to the stage, and we will go forward with the program.
Good evening, everyone. So what a day today's been. I started Friday afternoon with the board and into the foundation board meeting, and I can't tell you enough how grateful I am for Kurt and Tom, the chairs of both boards, the way they've onboarded and prepared and really have done a yeoman's job in just laying the groundwork and preparation for where we've been, where we are right now as an organization, but just personally, beyond profession, just so grateful to be a part of a process that has been so thorough and thoughtful and carried through all the way through present. So today, myself and Dan, and then eventually Michael and Jim, we launched into some very deep conversations, and a lot of buoyancy was needed in those conversations because you can sink into those pretty quickly. But essentially, Dan and Jim and Mike started going through the board presentation this last Saturday and allowed me so great latitude to pause and say, okay, tell me more about that. Like, what does that mean? Right? And so they were very, very comfortable in that space and allowing me to ask questions. And I'm the kind of person that I forewarn everyone that I'm going to ask you questions, but try not to take it personally. I mean, I'm curious, and I want to know where we are and what's going on. And then that, as Dan said, led us right into lunch with the management team And that same character of warmth and generosity and latitude and humor, because I'm also one of those people that I have to have humor in my day. I call it amusing myself, so something has to amuse me, or I get jittery. So I love to engage in humor, and everyone that I'm chatting with seems to enjoy humor as well. And so that's been fantastic and phenomenal. And already today, I can tell you, my goodness, right? Just by culture and by context, I feel home already. Just 3 days and one full day in the seat. So I really feel at home. I was able to share with the teams today, specifically the senior management team, my philosophies around leadership and service and communication more than anything. And they just received that overwhelmingly well. And that session ended with me saying, okay, you've heard my list of my philosophies. Now tell me your philosophies and I'll add them to my list. And let's integrate the way that we want to communicate and the way that we want openness. Moreover, more importantly, how does that openness, integrity of thought, and communication lead to real work, real genuinity? And if we had an idea that we wanted one day to speed to market, and I suspect one of these days we're going to have ideas we want to speed to market, like tomorrow. No, just kidding. But we'll have a moment where we're going to want to speed ideas to market. It only happens to a level of integrity where staff and board and community are synergistically in line, and openness is the cornerstone. So that was today. It's been wonderful, and now I get to spend time with you. I've also been doing very small meetings starting Sunday night, and was that last night? It was, right? I'm saying Sunday like it was 5 days ago. So last night, several people came around conversation, and that was just an amazing time. What I'm asking and what I asked for early from the board and the foundation board and Dan Dudley and Mike and Jim and now the staff and you is I've asked for a series of at least 90 to 120 days of allowing me the competency and the time to learn. I've asked the team to not try to put me in a decision-making role at this point. I think the worst thing a leader can do is start making decisions about an organization they know nothing about. And I want to be entirely honest with the community by saying things like, oh man, that's so great a question, I have no idea. And so for a while, that's what you'll need to hear because it's honest, like I don't know. Here's what I don't know, that's the lake, there you go. That's like now my full competency of Lakeside right now, and we are beside the lake, like there it is. I know other things, of course, but it's really important for me to put my ear to the chest, so to speak, of this community and listen, listen, listen. I want us to slow down our heart rate, so to speak. I want us to slow down our process. I want us to slow the way that we think, and the virus is allowing us the context to do that. And listen, listen, listen intently to the rhythm and to the work of our community. So that'll be really integral in the days ahead. One of my primary philosophies of leadership is open communication, and specifically with respect to punctuation. So I tell everyone that there's 2 punctuation marks I'm not real fans of. I'm not a real fan of periods in conversation and relationship. I hate for conversations and relationships to end when they had no business ending. I hate it when an early period shows up in a conversation when we needed to have more. And I certainly hate it when a relationship ends with a period when I knew we could have done more. So I hate that punctuation in a relationship. But the other one I really don't like either is exclamation marks. So I don't like to walk around going, wow, I never thought about that. So, you know, the 2 punctuation marks that I enjoy the most are pockets full of commas and pockets full of question marks. I think life and relationship do really, really well with those two punctuation marks. So when you have a pocket full of commas, you're letting everyone know around you, including yourself, that we're not done having this conversation. We'll put a comma on it and pick it up tomorrow. Not that we'll delay a decision when a decision is needed. But if in fact we're nowhere near a conclusion when the next conversation gets us there, then let's put a comma on that, and let's not try to fuss through some kind of false time frame that something has to be done right this second. Now, if someone's dangling off a cliff, we ought to solve that. But other than that, let's put a comma on it and let's continue the conversation until we can reach a good, solid conclusion. And the other one, of course, is question marks. I love, love, love the culture of question, the culture of curiosity, because I believe very strongly in this line, that if in fact you want to have faith as an outcome, and how many of you will just agree with me, just by show of hands, that in the days ahead, we as a community are going to need a lot of faith? That's all of you, right? Man, think about the short list you're working with that you're going to need faith on. You know, the kind of biblical faith, like the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things you can't see, like that level of faith. But even in that same chapter in Hebrews chapter 6, and this is as far as it's going to go, I'm not going to preach at you. Calmness now, right? But in that same chapter in verse 6, it says that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So if in fact faith is our outcome for things that we can't see, then we have to upstream two realities that actually create faith. Number one is we have to have a culture of curiosity, because inside of a culture of curiosity with question marks, we learn. And we're unashamed about it and unrelenting about learning. And the only way you can learn is not through conclusion, but through question marks. Because the culture of curiosity gives way to the one thing that faith needs to survive, and that's imagination. Because you can't even have faith if you don't have imagination. So one of the things I'm always going to ask people around me is the thing I ask of myself every day is, Dan, listen, if you feel like you've reached a dead end, knowing, of course, that in life there's no such thing really as a dead end, the only thing that actually exists in that moment is our inability to pivot. But if, in fact, that happens, stop and ask yourself, have you actually stopped thinking imaginatively? And then ask yourself and ask others around you to create a culture of imagination so that in the days ahead, my friends, when we actually need faith for things that we only imagine, faith for our ideals, faith for the ideas that are in our heart, or faith to speed an idea to market, like expansion or modernization or any of the things that we want to see happen in our community, that in that day, faith will be required, and rallying around that faith beyond aspiration, but good, hard, solid, database-driven metrics that allow us to have confidence for faith will come because we've taken the time to really be curious and allow that to give way to imagination. How many can see that that would be a successful path for us moving forward? Good. So that's what I'm asking the staff to do and the board to do, is before we go forging ahead and firing up the fires of our history, which forged fantastic ways that we live here today, let me listen. Let me listen intently. Let me listen to the heartbeat and the rhythm of our community so that we can come out in the next 90 and 100 days with the kind of data that will help drive conversations. Let me tell you what formed and framed that for me. Like everyone else, how many of you are fans of early childhood development? If you're not, I would encourage you to read an article, right? Because early childhood development is absolutely critical. Everything we learn in life is pretty much formed by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, depending on the individual. In some people, it's even younger than that. And so those early childhood years form us, and they shape us. They shape our opinions, they shape our decisions. So when I was in my early formative years, I wasn't raised in health. My whole family, my parents came from the coal mine region of West Virginia. I was born in Florida but raised in Ohio. As a matter of fact, not too many miles east of here in Lorain, and specifically Lorain County, in a small village that you can still Google today called Campedo. And so Campedo sits in the south end of Lorraine as the region's Puerto Rican community. And it's there because in the early 30s and 40s, the steel mills were recruiting workers out of Puerto Rico into Lorraine to work the steel mills. And they were marketing it, and they paid them well, and it was good. But that same migration, of course, as it does in most cultures, creates pockets of community. And years later, that village would be called Campedo in Lorraine. My family, though not Puerto Rican, I was raised in that village in Campedo. And so I can tell you that by the time I was 14, I was shocked when one of my Puerto Rican friends said, wait a minute. Do you think you're Puerto Rican? And I go, of course I'm Puerto Rican. And they had to point out to me that I, in fact, was anything but Puerto Rican. But when you are raised in culture, right, there's no real, I mean, I know I had a mirror, but I apparently wasn't paying attention to it at all. That I was clearly not Puerto Rican, but my entire context was Puerto Rican. And so because of the family that I was raised in that was shaping and forming my life, my family was very violent, and my family was very, very always in crisis. And neither one of my parents had graduated high school. Both of them were products of abuse, horrible, horrific abuse that they actually fled West Virginia to go to Ohio. Of course, I didn't know any of that when I was 6. I just know that now when I'm older. But I didn't understand any of that growing up. And so I grew up in that culture where I was raised to be rabidly independent. I had to protect my own life, and I had to learn how to thrive in the middle of not really great things. And so by the time I was 14 years old, I was on my own, literally, not even figuratively. So when I was 14 years old, I decided that being out of the house was better for me than being in the house. And so I left when it was 4 a.m. in the morning, and I snuck back into my parents' house at midnight. And so that's the way I was through junior high school and into high school. And if you ask me how did I graduate high school, I wouldn't be able to tell you how I graduated high school, but I did. When I was 18 years old, I heard for the first time in my life in an open-air revival, much like this, but in the middle of a football field, I heard for the first time in my life about God. And there was the revivalist down there just pounding on the podium. And at first I wasn't paying any attention to him because when you're 18 years old and I had lived the life that I had lived up until that point, I wasn't paying attention to anyone except what I needed to do to continue to make money and to survive. But pounding on the podium he was, and he was kind of reenacting what it would be like to nail someone's son to a tree, and he was pounding. And right about somewhere in the middle of all that, he got my attention. And for the rest of his message, I listened intently because I had not heard any time in my life that there was a plan other than the one that I was living. And so I was already saying by the time I was 18 that I would more than likely die by the time I was 21. I had already prophesied that, already predicted that. I was doing things that very few people were surviving, and worse yet, I didn't care about any of it, which made me very, very dangerous and makes anyone dangerous when you're fearless and you don't care about the outcome. And so that was my life, and so I heard for the first time that perhaps there could be a different path. Perhaps there could be a different life. And so I was one of those crazy kids that ran down to the football field. I got on my knees like he told me to, and I accepted Christ into my life. And for 7 years, my life got worse, right? Because I didn't have anybody to tell me anything about the decision I just made, right? I knew that I had accepted Christ. I started going to church. I didn't have any knowledge beyond they said I should go to church. I didn't understand worship. I didn't understand why the woman with the man on the podium looked like a penguin. I didn't understand any of that because of the uniform she was wearing. I'm like, why is she dressed like a penguin? I don't know, because she always wore black and white. But I will come to find out later it was a uniform of that particular faith. And but I stuck with it, right, because of what I heard and what I continued to hear every time I went to church, that God had a plan for my life. In the process of all that, of course, I got married and started having children. I put myself through college. Of course I did, right? If I put myself through high school, I put myself through college. As a matter of fact, I stole my father's car. It's the only car I ever stole. When I left the house when I was 18, graduated, I took my father's car, and I went to college. And 2 weeks later, he called me, and he goes, do you know where my car is? And I go, yeah, I've got it. And he goes, where are you? I said, I'm in college. He goes, what are you doing in college? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's better than where I was with you. So I had to take his car back, and then I walked to work every day. I know this sounds like a Lifetime movie, but honestly, it's not. So I just walked to work every day when I was in college until I saved enough money to buy a car, and every month I would just pay my tuition. Every month I would pay my room and board and my tuition, and that's how that worked. And so by the time I graduated college, I was also deeply involved in studying behavioralism, became very entrenched in the sciences of that, started working in the science of that, but that also landed me up in the state of Maine. Anybody been to Maine? Anybody want to go back? Right, just for the lobster? I do, like a lobster roll. Fantastic, right? Okay, I'll stop because we're all now salivating. Like, are you going to bring us lobster rolls, Dan? Was that a setup? No, it would have been good though. But started teaching high school in Maine, and was finishing some of my studies up there, and was going to church there, and two fellows by the name of Mark and Ken, who had been recent friends of mine, didn't really, in my mind, they didn't know me well enough to talk to me the way they were talking to me. But they came to me one night and they said, Dan, we've been talking and we have some observations about your life. And that really shocked and surprised me because I had lived now, and I was 23, 24. I'd lived that many years, and no one had ever even attempted to tell me about my life. And for 2 hours, I sat there, and it's like they read a book I didn't know was written, and they told me everything that was true about me. And it was the first real godly experience from a human being I had ever experienced. I mean, I just knew that God must be real because there's no way knew what they knew about me. They didn't know the details, but they read my book. And they just said, Dan, we can help you. And so they asked if they could mentor me and disciple me, and they did so for 2 years. That was when I was 25 years old. And they saved my life. Because what I was experiencing was not finding its way to real life. I was still violent, not to anyone else, but I was very violent. I turned all my violence inward. I was not happy with me. I was harmful to me. I didn't make any really good personal decisions. I wasn't developing spiritually or developing as a human. I was still behaving all the things that I had behaved in my life to get by, which is learning how to sell ice to an Eskimo. I could talk anybody into anything to do whatever I wanted. Those were all phenomenal skill sets, of course, only if you use them for good, which I was not. And so for those 2 years, they turned my life around. They helped me see that all my experiences didn't have to any longer define me, but they could shape me, that I could actually allow God to move in my life to make all those negative things make sense. They told me that I didn't have to unlearn who I was, but I had to unlearn how I was. And that was a very important distinction for me. And so when I was 27 years old, I felt like I could see life from a different place completely. And they were genuine in their pursuit of me, and we remained friends now many, many years later to this very day. One was a carpenter and one was a dental surgeon. So there you go. We put those two guys together. I guess they can read your book. And my life began to change. And I began studying my skill sets and started respecting my skill sets as a craft, and realized that God could take the totality of my life, all the bad and all the good, and focus it to the good of humans. And so that's what I did. I set out in career. I've been honored to travel the globe. I've worked and lived in third world countries, notably among them, I've worked in Southeast India, up around Calcutta. I lived there, I worked there, I studied there. I worked and trained field workers in leper colonies. By the way, you never go to India to work in a leper colony. You just go and somebody introduces it to you and you go. That's how that works. Although I will tell you that I've taken many teams of people with me to India, to leper colonies, to help them understand how adjective and descriptive free you have to be if you want to effectively work with people. You have to wipe away all the condition and all of the things that you think about them and all of their descriptors and just look at them as God would look at them, as a human being, his creation. And there was no better training ground for me than to work with field workers there. Those skill sets have taken me to multiple other places in third world countries. That led me ultimately in 2001 to Cherry Street Mission Ministries in Toledo, Ohio. And so I started there as a contract employee. I wouldn't go on as a full-time employee because I was in and out of India still. And all the time, we were raising our family, and my wife was very supportive in those years. And so it was good, but my friend who had just started Cherry Street as the chief executive asked if I would come off the field and raise up a volunteer community at Cherry Street, which had no volunteers. Now, ask me if I had ever have developed a volunteer community. Of course not, right? But given my context and my background, do I really feel like I needed to have done something to do something? Not really. I have to know the principles and mechanics of effectiveness, and we can work in the context. But I knew this, that volunteerism was about people, and I knew everything that was good about people, and I knew we could build a volunteer team. So I did that for a year. That was my contract, and then I was going to leave Cherry Street. And then something happened that the program director up and resigned without anybody's permission. And I thought to myself, wow, I would stay at Cherry Street if I could do something more than this. Like if I could be a part of the informative team, the team that is actually bringing informative decisions to the way that we were as an organization at the program level, then I would be happier. And so I went to my friend and I said to him, his name was Kopi, and I said, Kopi, Guantanamo, by the way, was his last name. He was a mix between Mexican and American Indian. And I said to Kopi, I said, listen, the program director left, and I know I'm getting ready to leave, but if you'll think about this, I'll stay and I'll take the program director's position. I said, but I have two criteria that you have to meet. And before I tell you what these two criteria are, because we had done a lot of work together over the years, I said, Kopi, I'm going to push all of my trust chips to the center of the table with you. And many times in career and relationships, you have to be willing to do that. How many of you have shoved some chips to the center of the table to get a project done, right? So you begin to cash in the trust that you've built with other people. And you do that not often, but you only do it, A, when you've got the surplus and the ability to do that. But you also have to do that in a way that says that it's worth it. What you're getting ready to do is worth it. It's worth you losing your job over, and it's worth you losing a relationship over. And so I asked him, I said, do I have enough? Do I have enough to ask you the two things that I need from you in order for me to take this job? And he said, yeah, you've done a lot of great work with me. And he said, what do you need? And I said, Kopi, I need you to leave, like physically leave. He's a Southern Cal boy. And I said, I need you to go away for 2 weeks. And if you can go home and visit your mom and dad in Southern California, that would be better. He goes, okay, I was getting ready to go. I can stay longer. He goes, what's the second request? And I go, well, it's not a request. It's a condition, not the same thing. I said, the second condition is that you can't ask me any questions about what I'm getting ready to do. So again, do I have enough chips to the center of the table? Trust. Do you trust me enough to go away and not ask me a single question about what I'm getting ready to do with your organization, right? Silly. But when you get to a point where you're willing to cash in over something that you have grown to love and believe in, then do it, right? And so I did. And he thought about it for a while. It was not a quick answer, but he thought about it for a while, and he said, okay, Dan. He said, I'll go and I won't ask you any questions. And on his way out the office door, he turned and said to me, well, what are you going to do? And I go, no, see, that's a question. I said, you can't even flip that into a statement like, don't do something I wouldn't do. Like, you can't even do that. But he did. He gave me free rein to do the right thing. And the right thing at that moment was everyone that worked inside of program needed to be fired. And I fired everyone. The next day, if I saw you, I terminated your relationship with the organization. Because as a volunteer coordinator, I had spent an entire year watching you. I watched you allow prostitution happen in the shower room. I watched you steal meat out of the freezer. I watched you conduct drug deals with homeless men and women. I watched how you prostituted the entire organization over your own selfish gain. So yes, you have to go, because there's no way I can build on that. You know, I learned early in my life and career that some things relationally you can rebuild, and some things you have to tear down. And the key of leadership is to know which is which. And there are some things that can't be rebuilt. You just have to demolish it and start over. Now, if we can rebuild it, my gosh, let's rebuild it, because it's far better. But that was not a rebuilding moment. I couldn't redeem that moment. We didn't have the time to redeem that moment. So I started calling in all of the other chips that I had around the community, to all the people that I had trained and all the people that I'd worked with in programming in the clinical world. And I said, I need you to come work to me for a while. I'll pay you well, but I need you to take a furlough from your job and come work with me for a month, 60 days, 90 days, whatever you can afford me, and help me rebuild this process. Take the weight of the daily operations off my shoulders so I can have the time to rebuild this team. And that happened within a few days. And I was working around the clock because, let me see, oh yes, I fired everyone. And so it was a 24-hour organization, so I was paying the price for that, of course, and I'd calculated that I was going to be working third shift, and I was going to stick around and work first shift, and I was going to try to get somebody to cover me for a few hours until I could go home and change. We could do it all over again. But God was with us, and one thing led to another thing, led to another thing, and in 2005, I was given the opportunity. Well, anybody ever been voluntold to do something? Yeah, like you weren't really given the option. And so actually in the fall of 2004, I had two board members come into my office, and they said to me, you are now the interim CEO, and they left. Like, there wasn't a question like, would you like this? Or how do you feel about this? Or go ahead and pray about this. They just said, you're the interim CEO. But unfortunately, the last thing they said as they were walking out the door was, we've hired a forensic attorney, and you're now under investigation. And I'm like, oh, well, this has been the best day of my life. Thank you so very much. And that lasted for 9 months, that interim process and investigation. My friend and CEO happened to be involved in things that were less than good, and I didn't know anything about it. And that all had to be proven, and it all had to be cleaned. Eventually, that process ended, and a national search went out, and in March of 2005, I became the chief executive officer. And so from that time until the time I left in 2019 were wonderful years for me, wonderful framing years for me. The board gave me tremendous latitude to think, to imagine, to have faith, to develop cultures of curiosity. They built all kinds of risk management around our ideas. We worked seamlessly together and did well together. And when I left Cherry Street, and to this very day now, Cherry Street is now a nationally recognized program, an organization that other missions around the globe are beginning to follow and emulate. So I've had that experience. All of everything that I've just told you, from 12 to 62, which is my age, I will tell you that one of the questions that I received, and I think it was Tom. Tom, are you here tonight? Tom Jones? Okay, great. So Tom asked me during one of the interviews a question that I knew I was going to get. And he set up the question like, he described Lakeside. And he said, Dan, when we look at your career path and Lakeside are about as far apart on the spectrum as one would hope to get. And I had been thinking about that question, right? Because I was asking myself the same question, like, Dan, what gives you the right, right, to think about Lakeside? It doesn't match your life and real-world experience. But I gave Tom the answer that I'd already concluded, and that is what I've already told you. That hopefully what my career path tells you, if I've spent my entire life caring for and developing people around me. That's what I've done. I've done it globally, and I've done it locally and nationally. And when I look at Lakeside, Lakeside isn't this or that or a descriptor or any other thing. Lakeside is people, and you've been people since 1873. You remain people. You are, in fact, my sweet spot. I know you're not going to skew on poverty, although I believe you understand it. I know that we're not experiencing homelessness, at least I hope not. I know all of those things are true, but one thing I know about you more than what would describe you or not describe you is that there's a beating heart inside of your chest. You are human. And you become my specialty, right? I know how to serve humanity. And I know how to serve humanity well and build teams and systems around that for effectiveness. So it has been with great joy that when I got the call from Kurt, who's also here tonight, I got the call from Kurt on August, it was a Saturday, Kurt. Do you remember the date? Was it the 3rd? The 5th, right? Something like that. So I had my final interview with the search committee on that Saturday morning at Catawba Island Club. And I got home, and that afternoon I got the call from Kurt inviting me to accept the offer to be the next CEO. Of course, I was thrilled and honored that moment, and I remain, even after today's conversation and being around the lovely people that I've been able to be around, I can tell you that that affirmation resounds again and again back to me in reverberating form that this was the right decision for Lakeside and the right decision for me as well. So with that in mind, we'd like to invite Michael up. He's going to ask a few questions. But while Michael is coming, I'm just wondering, we haven't really done this yet, but if you're here and you were on the search committee, would you just mind standing so we actually could know who you were? So if you're on the search committee, please stand. Yeah, let's give him a hand. A great and fantastic job. I had no less than 7 interviews, a criminal background check, which was very important, an academic background check, a 120-page behavioral assessment. Thank you for that. And many, many other in-between conversations. So I can attest that this was a thoughtful, thorough process. And I can stand here today on this stool and know that I was not standing at a deli counter with the next number in line, but that this search committee and this community and the board ultimately made a very thoughtful, on your behalf and the behalf of both our past, our present, and our future, the kind of decision that God will honor in the days and the weeks ahead. Can we just welcome Michael today as well?
Well, your story is absolutely, truly inspiring. And after being able to spend the last 3 days with you in different meetings, discussions out in the community, I can speak on behalf of the staff. We're very energized and very excited about you being here. And already the assignments you've given us have shown and demonstrated the type of leadership that you're bringing to the team and the skill sets that you're bringing that complement already a really great team that's here at Lakeside. And we're just thrilled that you're here. So one of the questions, these questions came in through email in our Facebook Messenger, and if people are watching at home, because there they are right there, and if you have questions for Daniel, if you do have questions for Daniel after tonight that we didn't have a chance to ask, go ahead and send them in on Facebook to us, or you can email us at our Lakeside email, and we'll try to get to them on Saturday when we also have another event here to get to know Daniel even more. One of the questions I had for you is you shared a little bit about Lakeside and your thoughts a little bit on it. I'm going to ask you some more about it in a minute. But what was your Lakeside experience? Because you had been to Lakeside before. Yes. So what are some of your experiences of coming to Lakeside, and what did you do when you did come here?
Yeah, so my first experience was about 15 years ago. I was doing some training and consulting for a church group in the Cleveland area, and they wanted to do some winter training, which I thought would be fun, right? pastors and leaders were getting off campuses and assembling in various kinds of groups, and they were asking me to just like populate those kinds of groups around the region. And one of those groups was right here. As a matter of fact, that yellow house, I think, or the gray house, or it could have been the White House over there. But one of those houses right over there was the leader of that group, their friend owned that. And if you're here and you own one of those houses, it was Bill and Harriet Maurer. So if that rings a bell, they invited me to Lakeside for the first time, and it was in the dead of winter. I think it was January or February, but I can tell you that lake was frozen. Having grown up in Lorain, I was very accustomed to frozen Lake Erie, but coming on the Lakeside was, even with the gates open and no one here, it made me very curious. But that was my first interaction, and I've always been honored to have friends that have lived at Lakeside. So I've been here a lot, right, just as friends, and enjoyed it as anyone coming through the gate would have enjoyed Lakeside.
So you remarked a couple times in our meetings and discussions how fascinated and how much you respect and are eager about working with the Lakesiders because of the generations, and that there's such a history of generations here and families that come here. Are you going to be bringing family here?
Yeah, so I've already been, now I have 4 sons in 4 different states, but I do have a son. My oldest son lives right here in Ohio, in Waterville, as a matter of fact, which is not more than an hour from here. He has 4 of my grandsons, actually 4 of my grandchildren, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I'm already in negotiation to to get them here. And of course, you wouldn't know, but they just bought a house where they live, and they're in the throes of moving, or else I would have had them here this weekend. But I love, one of the things that I love about Lakeside and have from its beginning of my experience is the amount of unattended children. Outside this gate, that's what they're called, right? An unattended child. In Lakeside, you know what they're called? Children. So it's very unsettling at first if you're not used to it, right? Like, even at Disney, before you get off the bus, it's like, take children by the hand. And I always think when I'm on the bus at Disney, when they say take children by the hand, I'm like, should I just start grabbing children? Like, because you're not being very descriptive. You didn't say, like, take your children by the hand. So I'm like, I know, you just have to infer it differently. But I can't wait for my grandchildren to skip and dance down these streets the way I see children enjoying this environment, because they will absolutely go crazy over this space. So I can't wait until they come.
So you've been here you've been in this position for now, let's see, about 18 hours. So, but you've been here really since Friday, and experiencing the grounds, meeting a lot of people. What is your, and today, of course, spending time with the staff, what is your overall first impression that you've had now, not being a candidate, but now actually being the new CEO and president that has come to you in the last 3 or 4 days?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you why I think it's great. When you're a candidate, you have to put your game face in it, right? And I don't mean that as a falsehood. I mean, you have to put your shoulder into the conversation. You hope that your personality and you hope that the things you value shine through, for sure. But one of the things that Kurt and others have invited me into is the pause. Like, Dan, let's see you, not the candidate, but you, the person. And I've loved making that transition. But the thing, to answer your question, the thing that I've noticed the most is before the virus hit the world, the only way that we as a community knew how to embrace was to physically embrace. We have had to literally learn how to embrace with our eyeballs now, right? Because I can't even see your whole face. So it's like I get an entire world of half faces, right? Like, hey, do you remember me? And I'm like, I remember your mask, right? And then God help you if you change your mask from one day to the next. I have to meet you all over again. I have no idea who you are. So we're facing that, right? But the thing that I've noticed, and I started noticing this last night in some of the meetings that we had last night, I believe I mentioned this, and I know I mentioned it to you guys today, Michael, is that I've never been in a place where I feel a warm embrace without being physically embraced. And there is something in the tone, the voice, the eyes, the warmth of conversation that you can feel that. And that has been remarkable to me. I don't know how you guys pull that off, but you pull it off, right? But it's very indicative and I think historical of this community in ways that are living and excelling even in the face of a global pandemic.
So you jokingly said that your life, especially in your younger years, was kind of like a little bit of a Lifetime movie. Yeah. But growing up with your experiences, the opportunities you've had working in really third world conditions, whether it be here in the United States or in third world countries, the work with Cherry Street Mission, serving the underprivileged, the poor. What from your experiences are you most excited to bring to the Lakeside community? Because you have such a diverse background.
I do. Well, I think that's a great word, diversity, right? You heard the community I grew up in. I've lived in cities, only really ever lived in cities around the world, and particularly here locally. I believe that's one of the aspects that I bring naturally to Lakeside, because diversity does show up in conversation at Lakeside, and I know you know this. There's concern around that here, and it was a themed concern in my interview process, along the lines of, Dan, we're not very diverse. How can we be diverse? Which is a great question. And of course, my answer to that is don't try to be diverse, right? That's, if you really want to be diverse, think what kinds of systems in life do we need to live in order to produce diversity? Because you really can't like wake up one morning and go, that's it, we're diverse. No, you're probably not, right? You could probably do it for the summer, but it's not going to be reproduced next year. So I'm most excited, Michael, to walk with this community on this line alone. And there's an easy dozen of things that I'm excited about. But the diversity aspect is of deep interest to me because it's something that I've lived very naturally and have been around diverse cultures my entire life and career. So I really looking forward to serving in that space and making it a part of the listening tour, make it a part of our planning, making sure that we've got great understanding and real data-driven realities around that, bringing people to us that can help us think about our culture and ways that we can think in the ways that we want to think about this culture. Because I haven't met anyone who's like, Dan, don't you touch the way we are. Now listen, if you're out there, you've not come in contact with me, right? And if you did come back, I'd probably laugh. I'm like, oh, you must be the town jokester, right? Because everybody that I'm meeting is like, no, we feel like we're poised for change. And we want to continue to lean into the wind of possibilities. And that's what I feel a lot here at Lakeside. We may not know the compass heading yet, but proverbially we do know it's west, right? We know it's that direction. We just don't know what point in that direction we want to go yet, not until we get into some of our processing. I'm sorry for the long answer, but if we can shape and form a culture that is open and welcoming and loving and kind, that everybody, and here's the joy, right? That everybody, regardless of race or gender, ethnicity, would enjoy what you and I enjoy. What a day, right? What a day that will be. And why wouldn't it be? Because that diversity brings texture, and that texture brings ideas, and those ideas help us speed our ideals to the markets we want to go to.
So, perfect segue into my last question for you is, you've shared with the staff today, and you spent a lot of time with the senior staff today outlining some of your processes and how you think, and allowing us to get inside your head a little bit. And we appreciated the fact that we could.
Scary?
It was a little scary, but I'll be back tomorrow. So, just teasing. But no, it was actually great to talk philosophy today. A lot of times when you have a new leader come into an organization, you're hitting the ground running, and the idea to talk about philosophy, which is actually probably at the core some of the most important things you need to address in establishing the relationship of colleagues. You allowed us to do that right away, and we allowed you to do that as well. Yeah. And that was a great way to begin the day with the staff and your first official day with us. So would you share with the community what you've already shared with us and what we've already been learning about you, is how do you craft, what is your process for moving forward and crafting the vision for the next chapter of Lakeside?
That's great. Before I answer that question, I'm going to narc Dan Dudley out a little bit. So the four of us sat down in the Chautauqua. Am I getting close? Yeah. Chautauqua? Yeah. Am I? Okay. Because Kurt told me last night, the reason why you're not getting the pronunciation, Dan, is because you're speaking Spanish. And I'm like, oh, okay, that helped a lot. I need to speak more American Indian. So that was, and Jim, are you here, Jim?
No, he's not here tonight.
Oh, Jim said to me last night, he said, you know, Dan, when you learn to spell it, I'm like, I went home, I went into the kitchen last night after it was all over. I'm like, how did Jim know I didn't know how to spell Chautauqua, right? but he was right. Like I was not including all the U's were gone out of my spelling. So I looked at it last night and I'm like, oh my God, there's 3 U's in this thing. No wonder I was going Chautauqua, right? I was so completely wrong. Anyway, so we sat down in the hall this afternoon. By the way, there's entirely too many halls at Lakeside. And we sat down at Chautauqua Hall, and the four of us, and of course, this is why you love Dan Dudley. I'm learning why you love Dan Dudley. As soon as we sat down, Dan's like, here's what the agenda is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how about if we say hello? Like, how about if we have expressions of love, Dan Dudley? Could we have at least one half a salutation or something? And so I said, Dan, before we jump on that, would you mind if we just shared philosophies together? And of course, the other reason you love Dan Dudley is his adaptability and spin on a dime framework. And so without hesitation, Dan, thanks so much, man. You're a lovely, lovely human being. You are.
By the way, we're still on the second agenda item.
Also, Mr. Dudley, we went through 6 hours of talking, just got to the second line item. Okay. That was weird, Michael, what you just did there. Okay. So the answer to your question, Michael, of course, is Lakeside has a masterful master plan. I know you spoke into it. I see your footprint and your eyeballs all over it. I think it's 27 plus pages, and you had it color bound. So, wow, right? It's beautiful. I've read the master plan coming up on about a half a dozen times. And the second time I read the master plan, I told Sylvia today, is Sylvia here? Okay, so the staff don't come to these meetings, got it. So I said to Sylvia, right? I mean, the staff, oh, I'm sorry, there's Alana and Hannah, the first Hannah, right? Whoever the second Hannah is. Yeah, oh, I know, you guys are now in rabid competition. And Lizzie and Alex, right? And Shirley and David over here, right? David has to eat on the job. That's how busy that boy is, right? And so the reality is that we've got a masterful master plan. The second time I read the master plan, I got my calculator out and I started, I've been involved in multiple millions of dollars of capital projects, and I began adding up just off the top of my head all of the items in the master plan, and I stopped at about 150 million, right? I did. I'm like, this is like, that's why I call it a masterful master plan, because it is like a Santa Claus list. It is like we want. Now listen, I'm not meaning that as a detriment. I'm saying, my gosh, if you're going to have a masterful master plan, you should swing for the back fence. Don't go light, man. Leave it all on the field. And that plan does that. But you also know, my friends, that we've been many years, too long, without a good, strong, strategic process that would help us understand that masterful master plan, right? And because we don't have a really focused strategic plan that didn't come off the desk of one or two individuals, but comes from and emerges from the context of community itself, that the community forms from stakeholder meeting after stakeholder meeting what our strategic plan is, then we don't even have a tactical plan. We have no real understanding about how we're going to get that done. And so when the listening tour begins to wrap up in about 90 days, and I'm already beginning to draft just some things at the high level that I think we need to start boring into, we will launch at the board's request and at the board's leadership, of course, the strategic plan that will include stakeholder meetings and staff and people from outside the community, because a true strategic plan needs to have people in the plan that don't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak. They don't really have a stake in the outcome, because that's really where you're going to get honest, clear, true information, is to get that stereo, symphonic sound around a great strategic plan. And then and make sure the staff is involved with that, and specifically get the staff involved in the tactical plans. Sun Tzu in The Art of War said that tactics without strategy without tactics is the sound heard before death. Or actually, tactics without strategy is the sound heard before death. And so we have to have the right measurements, the right metrics. It has to be thoughtful, yes, but it also has to be measurable, and it has to be achievable, and it has to resound with the kind of outcome that we set forth to achieve. And so with that process, Michael, by the time spring rolls around, it is my hope that we will have a solid strategic plan that is birthed from the community itself and have worked on a tactical plan, and we'll be able to forge in 2021 and beyond the metrics of that and the work of that and the earnestness of that. And of course, all of that will drive everything else we do. It'll inform every decision and every conversation we're getting ready to have for the next decade. So that would be our process.
Great, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, good.
So again, if you have other questions that you would like to ask Daniel, please go to the official Lakeside Chautauqua Facebook page, or email us at our general Lakeside email, and we'll try to incorporate those questions with our next dialogue with you, which is Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock here at the bandstand. If you'd like to come up and meet Daniel, we just ask that you do socially distant and then kind of form a line so that we're keeping people safe, and so that you can also get a chance to meet this incredible man who we've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with this weekend and today, and will be helping us shape who we are in the future. So thank you. Let's give Daniel another round of applause. And thank you again.
I was so concerned that Michael was going to be like socially distanced, like stand in the grass. Because if that were the case, I was going to spend the entire evening being yelled at. So that wouldn't have worked well. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time tonight and for coming this evening. Michael, thank you for the questions. And Dan, thanks again for your leadership in getting us here. God bless everyone.